Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And I'm standing very close to where the podium was on May 23rd, 1943, when Battleship New Jersey was placed into commission. The keynote speaker during that address was Undersecretary of the Navy James Forrestal, who would go on to be the country's first Secretary of Defense. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about the Defense Department, War Department stuff, because that is what is in the news right now. I'm going to try and stay apolitical on this and keep my opinion of what it should be called out there. But you know, as a historian, initially hearing that they're going to change the name of something, my gut reaction is, don't do that. It's always been called that. But in reality, it hasn't always been called that. So let's go through what different names the Department of Defense has been called, and hopefully that'll inform you on how you feel about the possible name change. If you're not watching this from America or you haven't seen the news lately, earlier this week, we're in early September 2025, President Trump signed an executive order saying that he was going to rename the Department of the Defense into the Department of War. Where did it all start? So, in 1775, even before the United States existed, even before the United States had declared independence from Great Britain, the Continental Congress was formed, and the Continental Congress began to form committees which would take groups of members of the Congress, and they would specifically focus on smaller aspects of administering a country. It really was practice for when the nation became a country, and it starts thinking about the various colonies as one unified organization, as opposed to a series of 13 separate colonies, each with their own governance. One of those committees administered the army and formed various colonial militias into a single continental army. Likewise, one of those committees revolved around the Navy and Marine Corps. I think that was the Marine Committee that did that. So these two committees, for most of the Revolutionary War, served to administer those organizations. Now, in reality, the Army has several committees that are administering it, one that are getting supplies, and one that's doing funding, and one that's doing recruiting troops and things like that. Maritime aspects still just have the one committee there doing both Navy and Marine Corps stuff. In 1776, when the United States becomes a country, there is a Board of War that is founded. And again, it is like the committees, it is part of the Continental Navy. It is part of the Continental Congress that is organizing the country. In 1781, the Articles of Confederation come into being, and that takes over from the Second Continental Congress as being the governance of the states. And that does have a Department of War. From then on, that organization is called the War Department. And everything relating to the military falls under the War Department at this time. In 1789, the Constitution creates a new form of government that takes over from the Articles of Confederation. And along with the creation of the executive branch under the Constitution, President Washington creates a War Department again, this time under Secretary Knox, who was one of the prominent Revolutionary War generals that served alongside Washington. That War Department starts off initially in charge of all military affairs. However, in 1798, as the first warships are completed for the U.S. Navy and the first Marine units are being formed to go onto those naval vessels, they break out the Department of the Navy from the War Department. Each of those has their own secretary, a Secretary of War and a Secretary of the Navy. And that is the way things stand all the way up through most of the history of this country until 1947. In 1947, World War II has just ended, and the United States is participating in the Cold War with the Soviet Union. So under President Truman, they start to reorganize some things. One of the things that they reorganize is the War Department gets turned into a Department of the Army and a Department of the Air Force. Prior to this, the Air Force had been part of the Army. It was the Army Air Corps. So this 1947 breaking down into Army and Air Force, creates the United States Air Force. At this same time, those organizations, as well as the Department of the Navy, which still has the Navy and the Marine Corps in it, are put under another position called the National Military Establishment. Now, the National Military Establishment breaks down into an acronym, NME, enemy. This was almost as bad as when the Commander-in-Chief U.S. fleet was called SINCUS. Like, terrible acronyms. Acronyms are the worst to begin with, and when your acronyms spell out horrible portmanteaus, well, then you got to change them. So just 2 years later, Truman goes in and says, yeah, National Military Establishment, bad name, we're going to switch that over to the Department of Defense. And it has been the Department of Defense ever since then in 1949. Of course, the first Secretary of Defense is James Forrestal, who is the keynote speaker when Battleship New Jersey is commissioned. Importantly, these sorts of name changes are created by acts of Congress, not under the executive department. So while President Trump has said that he's renaming the Department of Defense into the Department of War, which it's always been War Department before, there's never been a Department of War. Since he's making that name change, executive order cannot do that. So far, as of the filming of this video, it is just making it an AKA, as known as. So you can call it either Department of Defense or the Department of War until Congress votes on it and changes the name officially. In the meantime, we'll continue to spend millions of dollars changing signs and name tags and things like that throughout the Department of Defense to make them say Department of War. We can't even pull the old War Department name tags out of storage because Department of War and War Department, they're two different words. I'm just glad I'm not the IT person for the Department of Defense who now has to change all of the email addresses for every single employee. So, what do you think is an appropriate name for the National Military Establishment? Let us know in the comments section down below. Department of War, Department of Defense, does it matter? Let us know what you think down below. Remember to keep it civil, this is a family channel. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, not the Department of War, from the Department of State, also from a number of other private individuals and organizations. We really appreciate their support. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to donate to support the Battleship. You can also support us by liking, sharing, subscribing so more people find about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.